When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ledlow, and enjoy today's episode. Well, hello, everyone. This is Mark Ledlow, the host of Fearless Mindset Podcast. And today, as you can tell, I am not in the studio. I'm on the road in Northern California, taking care of business. So that's why you see a different type of setup. But hey, it works. You can do a podcast from anywhere. So if you're holding yourself back, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just tell a story. Have a guest on, like Jonathan. We have Jonathan today from East Coast, a good friend of mine in the industry. Jonathan Perillo is working with his company, Safest, and he's a Army veteran, but Marine Corps. I don't want to insult him because we take pride in the Marine Corps uniform and what we did in the Marine Corps. So he served 4 years in the Marine Corps, and no disrespect to our Army veteran brothers and sisters out there. No disrespect to them. And we've been working on getting Jonathan on the show for a little while. He runs a busy company over there. He's doing things and shaking up trees and bushes and turning the world upside down. And Jonathan and I were just talking that he's gotten several awards last year just for being a servant in the industry of security. Jonathan, share with the audience how busy you've really been in the industry serving everybody.
We've taken on some really cool initiatives in different organizations. Last year, I was incredibly fortunate to be recognized as ASIS International's Next Gen of the Year. And then at the same time, I was recognized by the Hartford Business Journal, awarded in their class of 40 under 40, which is all industries across the state of Connecticut, which just caught me completely by surprise. So, I think it proves a lot where security is really having an impact in organizations, and the impact is being recognized by businesses as a whole. Some really cool initiatives that I've been working on as well. Last December, 1 year after the UHC shooting, I had a major article published in SJA. And that's just led to some incredible conversations. It's going to be follow-up articles, follow-up presentations. And we also began working with the Life Safety Alliance Legends program and just awarded our first inaugural class this February, I believe.
Yeah, we were actually published too at the same time in that same magazine with you. I think we're all together in that magazine last year.
I think so.
And then we saw you at the OSPAs award too. Weren't you a judge in that last year in New Orleans or something like that? I saw you getting an award.
So that was where I was awarded the ASIS Next Gen of the Year. But I also served as a judge on the US OSPAs. I was invited with my roles within ASIS International to help judge some of the categories there as well. And what an awesome experience.
One of the presenters of that, and you're there and kind of connected. Man, this is a big deal. Everybody really there's like a couple hundred people in that room. Yep. So big deal in New Orleans that week. And that was a lot of partying that week. It's like in Vegas at New Orleans, right? Being a Marine, leaving the government and going to the private sector, what do you see the younger next generation struggling with, dealing with the OGs in the industry? Is there like a power shift going on within the security sector? Well, this is the way we always done it. Well, why don't we do it this way? What are you seeing out there? What's the grumbling in the industry that people don't want to talk about that needs to be talked about?
The industry is expanding, right? So it's new frontiers. We're getting out of this kind of idea of trying to return to a state of business as usual and dealing with this environment of polycrisis, which means we have to deal with more teams and more avenues throughout the organizations, throughout the industry, throughout the world. And we don't talk the same language. And I'm not just talking about native language. I mean, we talk about risk differently. We talk about all of these different things differently. If you've had a conversation with an IT person lately, it's like you're speaking two different languages about the same thing. If you talk with somebody from legal, it's like you're talking about it with two different languages as well. And that's really one of the biggest issues that is holding up things like convergence, and it's holding up things like standards and different ideas like that. Is because we're using different words to explain the different things, but that carries different meanings downstream. So the idea of finding a more unified language, which occurs as industries mature, But that common language is really what we need to be seeking, so that when I'm talking to the IT professional, I know where it's falling in their head with what I'm saying, and I can use the language that they use better, and then vice versa.
That's a key point because our company is going more into risk advisory type of the business versus what we used to be known as just exec protection.
Yep.
And we're talking to a lot of attorneys, a lot of C-suite, a lot of CFOs, and they talk a different language than just layman language, if that makes sense to the audience. And so we're finding we have to use different words. And then we get in those environments, in those rooms, giving presentations. I know Mark and Eric went down to Palm Beach. We got invited to do a family office type of presentation, and knowing what words your audience needs to hear as buzzwords, like, oh, you know that? And so if you come across educated and, it just opens up more doors.
Right.
Wouldn't you say that's true?
Well, not only that, but from a cultural perspective, right? So can this person be a trusted advisor if I can't understand what they're saying? And so roping it back into the Marines, I could get any Marine to do everything if I say good to go for like 5 times in a sentence, right? Because that's the jargon and that's the words that they're used to. And so they're like,
Sure.
oh no, I can trust this guy. I get it. So it helps it fall into place with them better. If I say doggone this and like it just, it's a language and it's a cultural thing where are they part of my tribe? Are they looking out for what I'm looking out for? And do they understand what's actually concerning me? Especially when you're moving into a position just like Ledlow is with shifting into a role of a trusted advisor. That's a tribal connection, and you need to be able to be seen as one of the team.
Wow, that was a golden nugget of advice right there.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've been exec protection for so long, secure transport for so long, and all of a sudden we have people reaching out to us like, hey, do you happen to do risk advisory for enterprise?
Right.
We're like, yeah. Well, why don't you guys talk about that more? Like, oh, what does that look like? What does that mean? Oh, protective intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, can you do a report for us? And I think we get so caught up in what we know, we really don't talk about the stuff we don't know because we haven't really educated ourselves on where the security industry is like going. Like you said, everything's converging. Everything is changing.
Right.
I mean, we have, I think the last couple of weeks, we've had major cyber warfare going on behind the scenes because everybody knows about what's going on in the Middle East as we speak.
Right.
And so he had the adversaries going after enterprise organizations, trying to do billions of dollars in damage on different brands and different entities as a retaliatory payback for involvement in the Middle East conflict. And so it's, one thing about security, it changes daily, if not hourly.
It does. And then again, what we're looking for is insights to our perception of what's going on. So particularly if it validates what we're feeling. So what we're seeing more, and I think Eddie Sorrells just had a fantastic interview on CNBC. I think it was CNBC.
Saw that.
Where
Shout out to Eddie.
Talking about more and more, especially global companies, are putting geopolitical risk into their risk registers. At the same time, what we're seeing is cyber breaches are typically periodic events and do not have long-term impacts. And so it's a huge dynamic change into risk reporting. And that is going to drive business into a place where they are going to want similar indicators to what cyber has from other security avenues. And that poses a problem today because cyber information is incredibly readily available through multiple avenues. Through your own system, there's constant status checks, and being able to see tempo and gather that information is pretty readily available. Whereas, especially with the mix of misinformation that's out there, it is harder to get, especially for geopolitical intelligence, that same rapid level of insight.
Yeah, the social media, especially Facebook, Instagram, first thing I do is in the subtitles, I look, is this AI? And sure enough, AI generated. I'd say 90% of the stuff I see is AI generated.
Right, country of origin. And so this is where it's a talent that's being developed in the security industry. And you're seeing more and more professional analyst services, trainings, things like that are really, they called it years ago where we really needed to push into understanding and interpreting the intelligence signals that we're getting for the betterment of the business. And thank God those professionals had that foresight and started shifting the industry this way, because it is really paying off.
Yeah, funny we're talking about this. I was leaving DC for MOSAC week, and up on a flight from Delta to Salt Lake, and I'm sitting next to the guy is hammering out something on his laptop, and I'm like, I bet this guy's a banker. And I profiled him pretty quickly, and we started talking. And yeah, you look like a finance guy. He goes, yeah, I'm actually a private equity owner of something XYZ company. I'm like, oh, I thought so. He goes, what do you do? How'd you figure me out so quick? Oh, I'm in the risk mitigation business. I have a boutique security firm. I said risk advisory firm. He goes, oh, wow. What do you do? Well, we protect people and assets and resources and stuff like that. And I asked him a key question, like, so you're being a banker in private equity. What are the biggest risks and fears you guys have right now in the banking world? You know what he said? Crypto and AI has us cringing.
It's crypto and as it's
as is in the industry, the AI industry and crypto industry. He said they don't know what to do. So they don't know how to measure the risk with these new industries.
Well, and not only that, but it's a market disruptor. And so especially for banking and finance, their brand is longevity and trust. So slow to turn. We don't, just because this is happening in the world doesn't mean that we're closing our doors overnight. That's the brand of banks, finance, insurance firms, things like that. So when you deal with market disruptors, it's really it's like oil and water, because it's different mindsets. It's interesting to see, we have people that are very long-term thinking with their strategies versus people that can't see past next week, because what their market is, it could change in 3 or 4 days. And it's incredible to watch the conversations between them, especially when they find a common language. Because once they find that common language and they can talk about it, then they gather those insights and they see how how the things are measured differently. And again, from a risk perspective, anything with that common language. How do we approach this so that it makes sense to both of us? We can both rationalize this, and it benefits our organization to approach it this way. So again, culture, language, those are the really fundamental things that are going to get us through. One of the quotes from him was, I said, how do we adapt to AI? He says, AI will let you be more human. AI, business relationships aren't made off of bits and bytes. They're made off of meeting in person, building relationships, and being human together. He's like, AI will never be able to accomplish that. How do you adapt to AI? You become more human. And I think that's where organizations need to head.
You see a lack of that right now in the industry. Is it people just trying to be sloppy and maybe be lazy in their work ethic and work effort to produce product and services? They just relying too much on automation.
It depends on the organization. It depends on the culture. It depends on the market. Out of COVID, where we had hybrid and remote working, and work cultures have changed a lot of ways for the better, a lot of ways that are detrimental. It's neither better nor worse. It's just changed. One of the things that multinational organizations have for challenges is cultural differences between regions, because of outlooks, because of different work expectations based on their geographic location, different approaches, there's lots of different problems when you deal with trying to fit everybody into one box like you do in a global organization. And so that's where strategies like decentralization come in, autonomy, where you're working off of more guiding principles and allowing humans to interpret what needs to happen instead of trying to build a rough structure that works off of, straight lines.
Right.
Yeah, humans are
Hey,
not.
what are you hearing from your partners?
Oh, I was saying humans are not straight lines.
Yeah, we're
Exactly.
We have our issues and complexities. What are you hearing from your colleagues and people that you collaborate with? How is the Middle East affecting business? I mean, I've seen a slowdown in requests for services from a lot of different clients that we have. I think everybody's sitting and waiting to figure out what they can do, what they can't do. And what are you seeing as disruptors and this geopolitical climate we have with Iran now?
So Iran, the way I'm kind of approaching it is that this is just part of a larger polycrisis, and it's just a new chapter in the same book. So we have Israel, Gaza, we have Ukraine, we have all of these other issues that are going on throughout the world. It's just an incredibly dynamic time. Leading through it is going to take flexibility, and we have to understand that as we go through this, we're not seeking a return to business as usual. The business as usual that we should be seeking is a more malleable state by which disruptions like this are quickly adapted to. That's where I think organizations need to have their heads about this right now, is just there's going to be potentially unlimited chapters in this book of disruptions. And it's not about trying to get back to the first chapter where everything was green pastures. It's about finishing the book and getting through it, adapting to it as you go. And as chapters throw new and new challenges at you, being able to twist, turn, and hopefully find opportunities where you can strengthen your organization through it as well.
Very good point. I know the big question probably the audience is wondering is, when is this going to be over? When's this whole war thing going to be over? And that's the $1 million question. Because if everybody had that answer, we'd be on this podcast. We'd be sitting in the bank, and we can capitalize on even good risk advisory to people. But who knows? We don't have a crystal ball on forecasting at the end of this campaign, whatever they're doing over there. The unknowns is what drives people crazy.
Right, and again, it's a global issue that's presenting global issues, right? And we'll liken it all the way back to COVID. So at the very beginning of COVID, we were like, hey, 2 weeks, let's hit this thing solid for 2 weeks. And here we are years later, and we're still not back to any sort of business as usual. And that's kind of a good thing, because again, most organizations, especially the organizations that have grown throughout it, have used it as an opportunity to find themselves in a more adaptable state. And without COVID, with what we're facing today, they may not have survived this, but that helped get them off of the block into something, into a state where they can adapt more easily.
Adaptability is key in, staying in business. You just got to overcome and adapt and figure out ways to stay alive. So what's the big motivator for you and what you're doing in the industry? What's the thing that you're most excited about in the security space?
I just love keeping people safe. That's really it. For me, it's about people. That's kind of what's driven me all along. I was in high school when 9/11 happened, and man, I was pissed. Imagine being a pissed off teenager.
Wow.
Right? So, but
that's what you were.
Because as soon as 9/11 happened, I joined the wrestling team. I joined the football team. I did all of these things to make sure I was in good. That was my goal. Get into Marines, go over, let's do something about this. And then I realized, actually, after the Marines, the reason that I loved my time in the Marines, and God, I'm proud of it. But the reason I always felt a little bit misaligned with it is what made me join the Marines was the drive to keep people safe. And while that was what I was doing, I couldn't directly see the impacts of my efforts there. I could go back home and see that, that things were, at least appeared to be safe. But it wasn't something that while I was doing it, I could see the effects of it. And that's where security is really different, is because as you're doing these things, I also found that while I enjoy operating at a more operational level, the administration is really where I thrive, the strategy and the framework behind it. And that's really where I make my biggest impact. So that's why I've kind of shifted into those roles, which is just kind of an overall ideas instead of really getting in there with my hands on. I can still see the impacts I'm having, but this is where I feel I can have the most impact, because I'm making sure that my people have the tools that they need and that the organization is aligned to where we can make the biggest impact that we can. And then just out of passion from that, it just turns into a hobby. You start seeing things because you need to figure out ways to do this. Security is such a broad topic. You need to go out and you need to tap into the experts. And it's important to go out there to those experts and say, hey, I really appreciated that you posted that or that you shared that, because that helped me so much. And that keeps the wind in their sails, because that's how you change the world, is finding the people that are making the difference and keeping them energized.
So true.
They gather and they share more with you. And then you're better equipped to go back to your organization. It's a self-feeding model. So, and here we are.
Well, it's honored to have you. It's been a journey for me, personal growth, from my first podcast with Mike Trott. Thanks for Mike coming on and being my guinea pig, as he said in the first podcast. And, 5 years later, here we are, and he moved on and launched Four Branches Bourbon. So the audience, if you haven't tried it, support Four Branches Bourbon with Mike Trott, and great product, helping out the veterans. And I love the marketing they're doing. I'm with you 5 years later, talking about geopolitics and, this whole Iranian operation going on. Who would have guessed, how fast our world has changed, and launching this podcast in the middle of the pandemic. There was nothing to do. And my producer was sitting down with me at a table in Sherman Oaks, Los Angeles. I was visiting a friend, and he goes, "Hey, now that everything's shut down, how are you going to get the word out that you're doing what you do when you can't go to conferences and conventions and hang out with people?" I'm like, "I have no idea. Have you ever listened to Joe Rogan?" I'm like, "Who's that?" And, fast forward to here, and I think people have a lot of fear, especially in our industry, as egocentric as this industry can be. I've never seen people so afraid to tell their story through a digital format of podcasting or get on a panel. It's just, I can be a badass bodyguard or protector, but telling their own story is almost like I had it, imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
I'm not good enough. I'm not Christian West or Joe Soros or Tim Wenzel or Jonathan here. I'm not these people. But you have your own DNA, your own fingerprint that you can bless the industry with, your own talents. Like you said, you talk to one person that's an icon and they posted something on LinkedIn and you go, "Oh, I never thought about that." We all have a different creative DNA, bandwidth that we think within our heads. And, you're the only person that could come up with that idea because you're you.
Yep.
And I think the industry, we kind of eat on our own sometimes. And,
Yep.
we see some stuff on social media and the mudslinging that goes on. But when I see that, I said, people aren't busy enough.
No.
Because if they're so busy working, they wouldn't have time to be hanging out on different forums and chat groups and doing whatever they're doing. I'm like, people are sitting around and they need to find purpose. They need to find their identity. They need to find what makes them tick again. I think COVID really paralyzed a lot of people, and
Right.
they go, "Oh shoot, what am I going to do?" And I think people are still coming out of that to this day.
Yeah. And again, because no matter how big you build your walls, no matter how many cameras occur, like this is something that we can't protect against.
Mhm.
This is the shift to from protection to risk management. And I really like how you were capturing there with security leaders trying to not expose themselves as being vulnerable. And it's a very important part of a security professional's job is to show that they are not vulnerable, because when you go into these meetings, you have to be the beacon of safety, right? And so in order to do that, I have to be impenetrable, and I have to be this, guys, I know what we need to do. Here's our way out. And to
Mm,
turn around in the
right.
same context and to the same, people who also have to embody this and say, "Hey guys, here's what scares me."
Mhm.
That's hard.
Not
I will
hard to
tell
do.
you that
Yeah.
the best security leaders are insecure, because those are the ones who strive to better themselves and to fill in the gaps of what they don't know. And they address what they don't know. One of my boss's famous quotes that I love is, "I can either learn it or I can hire somebody that knows it." And it's
Simple.
addressing
Business 101.
that this isn't something that I have the bandwidth to learn. I can learn. It doesn't play to my strengths or whatever it is, but I need to address this. Insecure people know how to address their vulnerabilities, and that's what makes a good security leader. So, if you will, security through insecurity, right? But I hate to put a
Sure.
twist on Tim Wenzel's leading through vulnerability, but that's what it is. It's security through insecurity. I think one of the best traits that you can have is to be insecure and passionate about trying to make yourself feel better. When you look at the thought leaders in the industry, what you will see is that most of them at some point have felt or have had to deal with imposter syndrome. And you will see all of them, almost all of them, I don't want to speak for everybody, but come to some sort of epiphany of, if not me, then who? Right? And that ties right back into the Marines, right? If not me, then who? So that's one of the things that I think is military, but especially Marines, that's why we thrive in this business. If not me, then who? And this is a vulnerability. I need to address it.